What kind of terrifying creature is the snow worship sect breeding? The bodies of over 100 sect members were devoured instantly. Just after the battle ended, the Radiant Prosperity Base quickly uncovered information about the Walmart theft, Zhangyi, in the Yulu residential area. Their intelligence department located the satellite signal of Gao Yuan, who had been missing for several days, at the intersection of Heron's River District and West Mountain area. Zhuge Qingting pushed up his glasses and analyzed. Lark Manor is the top affluent area in Heavenly Sea City, and Su Family Town has over 1,000 villagers. The force that has been battling West Mountain Base for months likely comes from here. Xiao Honglian pondered for a moment. This force had no quarrel with her, so why would they strike with such ferocity? And why did Gao Yuan's signal disappear for a while only to reappear? Everything seemed so suspicious, as if someone had orchestrated it intentionally. It seems we need to send someone to investigate first, Zhuge Qingting asked. Should we call the people from Morning Dew? It might be safer if both our groups work together. Xiao Honglian waved her hand. That's not necessary. Although we are not yet clear on how strong this mysterious force really is, the fact that they have been able to battle West Mountain Base for a long time shows that their peak strength is at most comparable to West Mountain Base. They were able to defeat West Mountain Base, which means they must also be significantly weakened. If we strike now while they are vulnerable, we might just catch them off guard. Zhuge Qingting was still a bit uneasy. After all, they have successively taken out 2 of our teams that included mutants. I think there is still some danger in acting alone. Thinking of her elder cousin, Xiao Honglian shook her head. Although Gao Yuan is a mutant, everyone has been polite to him out of respect for me. In reality, his strength is among the weakest. This time we'll send Dong Hu. I trust him to handle it. Referring to Wei Dinghai, Xiao Honglian spoke earnestly. As for Wei Dinghai, try not to reveal our plans to him. That old fox is very cunning. If it weren't for their needing our base, they certainly wouldn't be so courteous to us. Seeing that the leader had made up her mind, Zhuge Qingting said no more and turned to order his subordinates to call for Dong Hu. Meanwhile, in the Celestial Tribute District, after the war, the entire snow worship sect headquarters was in chaos, broken corpses everywhere. Jing Yishan, holding his injured left arm, felt a chill of fear. After all, he had nearly been instantly killed by the combined forces of 2 major powers. Han Chang and others looked at him with concern. Jing Yishan tore a sleeve to bandage his wound. I am not seriously hurt. I will go ask our leader for healing soon. I'll leave this place to you to manage. On the battlefield, after the initial rush of adrenaline, some survivors clearly seemed dazed. As they came to their senses and saw the mountains of corpses and seas of blood before them, they gradually began to feel the pain of their own wounds, and many fell to the ground, clutching their injuries and crying out in pain. Nuns walked out of the church and began to administer first aid to those with minor injuries. A wounded soldier with an arm blown off looked at the nuns for help. Help me, I'm not dead yet. A nun approached, her eyes filled with compassion, and a hot tear instantly rolled down her face. She held the remaining hand of the wounded man. You can no longer serve God in the flesh in this world. Go serve the essence of God in his kingdom. Then she took out a scalpel and with a swift, accurate, and ruthless slice, she cut his major artery, murmuring softly, I envy you, getting to meet God so soon. In these apocalyptic times, the chances of severely wounded survivors living were slim, and the snow worship sect didn't have enough medicine to treat them. Directly killing the severely wounded might seem too cruel, but framing it as sending them to meet the snow god early seemed much gentler. Han Chang was arranging the scene. Take all the wounded back for recovery, and don't waste those bodies either. Transport them all to an abandoned building behind the church. The followers moved the bodies to the entrance of the abandoned building, and Han Chang commanded, this is a sacred place of the snow worship sect. No one except the leader and the priests may approach. After everyone had left, suddenly a dense mass of green vines stretched out from inside the building, quickly enveloping all the bodies, and in the next second, all the bodies were dragged into the depths of the building by a powerful force. Inside the building behind the church, the entire corridor was covered with green vines. The vines tightly wrapped around the dragged-in bodies, seemingly absorbing some kind of nutrient. The growing vines entwined each body and then hung them from the ceiling. As a burst of red mist sprayed from the pores of the vines, blood-red apple-like fruits grew from the ends of the vines. At that moment, Han Chang stood at a high point outside the building, hands together in prayer, saying, May the Forerunners become the hope of the living, their flesh, our sustenance. Meanwhile, Yuan Kongya was conducting the grace ceremony, unconcerned with the turmoil outside. This batch of newly absorbed followers, having witnessed Yuan Kongya's miracles, were completely devoted to becoming members of the snow worship sect. At the end of the grace ceremony, a few young boys remained. Yuan Kongya looked at them, her gentle expression mixed with a hint of struggle. Come to me, my children. Yuan Kongya beckoned to the few boys below. The children looked confused. They didn't know why their parents had sent them here. Their parents encouraged from behind. Go ahead. Everything the leader does is for your good. To become qualified citizens of the snow worship sect, this baptism is necessary. Yuan Kongya had a boy lie on the altar, then gently pressed her right hand on his head, and the boy immediately felt weak, his limbs no longer his own. Yuan Kongya gently said, Don't Don't be afraid, child. You are harboring a demon on you, and I am about to exorcise it. Her face wore a gentle smile, but her hand drew a sharp dagger. The boy was immediately petrified with fear, but at that moment, apart from his eyeballs, his body was completely numb, and he couldn't even make a sound with his vocal cords. Yuan Konya brutally sliced into the boy's thigh root, blood splattering instantly, and from that moment on, the boy was no longer a boy. The boy passed out instantly, his eyes losing focus. Then Yuan Konya placed her right hand on his wound, and a golden light instantly radiated, and in a blink, the boy stood up as if nothing had happened. The boy's parents came forward, full of gratitude, and sincerely thanked Yuan Konya. Thank you, leader, for cleansing my son of the demon. He won't be as naughty as before, right? Yuan Konya nodded affirmatively. From now on, he will be a kind and sensible good child. The remaining two children, witnessing this scene, were terrified and turned pale. Why cut off the peeing part? I don't want any cleansing. They then turned and tried to run out of the church, but at this moment, their beloved parents blocked their way. Be sensible. The leader is doing this for your own good. The parents, who once adored them, now seemed as terrifying as demons. They picked up the children and walked toward the leader they worshipped. Yuan Konya looked at the two children in front of her, and her mouth emitted a gentle yet eerie sound. Next, who should be cleansed? After the children were cleansed one by one, their parents expressed immense gratitude to the leader. The grace ceremony ended, and the crowd gradually left the church. Soon, only Yuan Konya and Jing Yixian, who had just entered, remained in the vast church hall. Seeing Jing Yixian's severely injured arm, Yuan Konya couldn't help but show concern. Who could have injured you like this? As she spoke, she placed her left hand on the wound and began to perform a healing spell. However, Jing Yixian quickly interrupted her. Leader, you have already performed many blessings today. My wound is not serious. We can continue tomorrow. Yuan Konya smiled faintly, her smile as cold as ice and snow. Right, who attacked us? Jing Yixian withdrew his arm and replied. It was Xiao Holian and Wei Dinghai. They joined forces. A flash of surprise crossed Yuan Konya's eyes. They actually joined forces, which is not a good thing. Jing Yixian then explained the whole situation to Yuan Konya. After listening, Yuan Konya fell into thought. There's such a powerful mysterious force in Heavenly Sea City. They might even be responsible for the downfall of West Mountain Base. Jing Yixian continued. This mysterious force has a significant connection with a man named Zhang Yi. We have also received information about this name before. Now that I think about it, this Zhang Yi is definitely not a simple man. He is likely a mutant, and a very powerful one at that. Otherwise, he couldn't have possibly single-handedly held off the entire West Mountain Base, even destroying it in the end. At this, Yuan Konya also murmured softly, but there is also evidence that the most direct cause of the destruction of West Mountain Base was a missile from the River South Domain. Jing Yixian agreed. The missile is indeed the most direct cause, but it must also be related to this Zhang Yi. I think this person should not be underestimated. He must have considerable resources, otherwise he couldn't have survived until now. Moreover, based on the information we received last month, this Zhang Yi is likely involved in the billion-dollar theft from Walmart. Hearing this, Yuan Konya became interested. This person indeed warrants serious attention. Jing Yixian asked, if he really is powerful, we could consider allying with him to counter those bases. Nowadays, the resources in Heavenly Sea City are basically divided up by the major bases. Although we are barely surviving on blood vines, this is not a long-term solution. Just like in today's battle, when the two bases joined forces, we had no power to resist. If it weren't for their reservations about going all out, today my snow worship sect would have been in danger. So, we must ally with some other forces, and this mysterious force led by Zhang Yi is very suitable. Yuan Konya nodded after a moment's thought. Your analysis makes sense. With the current strength of snow worship sect, if it really comes to a life or death fight, any one of the three major bases could defeat us. I still need time to develop. If he really has the power to oppose the bases, and if we can bring him to our side, the power dynamics in Heavenly Sea City could be completely rewritten. Meanwhile, in the medical room of the shelter, Zhang Yi was very interested in the stimulant obtained from Gao Yuan. It can give ordinary people a physique comparable to mutants, which really shocked me. Zhou Kir was studying a slide under the microscope and then slowly turned to Zhang Yi and said, this drug is indeed very powerful. It is a military stimulant using the latest technology. It can significantly enhance human bodily functions in a short time and allows one to go without sleep for 3 days and nights. I have only read about this kind of drug in books. In terms of effects, it is dozens of times stronger than the ones I've given you, but the side effects are not something ordinary people can withstand. It essentially accelerates the metabolism of the human body, thereby enhancing the body's energy utilization. However, it actually represents a kind of insane overdraw, generally leaving one's muscles powerless. After the effects wear off, people with good constitutions may take a month to recover, while those with poor constitutions might just drop dead on the spot. Hearing this, Zhang Yi sighed. It seems that you can't have everything for free. A drug that makes people stronger without any side effects seems impossible. Hearing this, Zhou Kir frowned slightly and spoke somewhat mysteriously. That might not necessarily be true. Indeed, there are such drugs. I've I've heard that the military has been researching this kind of drug and has made breakthrough progress. It's said that they have managed to reduce the side effects to a very low level. However, the development costs are extremely high, and it is only equipped in small quantities in high-level military units. Zhang Yi, with his arms crossed, murmured in a low voice, "It seems that one must remain cautious even when encountering ordinary people in the future. The power of technology is not to be underestimated." Shou Kir took off her gloves, preparing to clean up the scene, when Zhang Yi casually struck up another conversation. "Kir, do you remember the rat poison we used back in Yulu residential area?" Shou Kir looked back at him curiously. "Why are you still holding onto that stuff?" Zhang Yi smiled mysteriously. "It's always good to have it. You never know when it might come in handy. Didn't you mention before that its lethal dose is 0.1 grams? What would happen if the dosage were even smaller?" Shou Kir didn't know what Zhang Yi was up to, but she seriously answered his question. "In extremely small amounts, the human body's detoxification system can eliminate it. However, if the dosage is managed well, around 5%, when the kidneys can't completely clear it, it can cause irreversible damage to the body, but won't kill immediately. However, if it's ingested continuously, the body's organs will gradually fail, and death is inevitable." Thinking about the current harsh environment, Shou Kir couldn't help but laugh. The medical environment is almost non-existent now, and people's resistance is very weak. In such an environment, ingesting this drug would definitely be fatal. Shou Kir looked at him curiously. "Do we have rats at home or something?" At this, Zhang Yi's smile became even more mysterious. "We have flour at home, but there are plenty outside." Meanwhile, in Su family town, several students were huddled around a fire to keep warm. The fire was not very strong, as fuel was increasingly difficult to come by. Wu Chenyu complained bitterly. "It's infuriating. Why should we live so stifled?" A boy next to him sneered. "If I had known it would be like this, I would rather have stayed at West Mountain Base pedaling bicycles. Though it was tiring, at least I wouldn't be hungry or cold like now. If I had to die, at least it wouldn't be from freezing." At this, Yi Xiaotian, who was nearby, couldn't listen anymore and angrily said, "Don't go too far. Liang Yu risked her life to save us, and instead of being grateful, you're here making snide remarks? Why weren't you sent for human experimentation back then? If you had gone through that process, I believe you'd naturally keep your mouth shut. And do you even know what you eat every day? It's protein solution made from human bodies." Yi Xiaotian still felt grateful towards Liang Yu. After all, the pain he had endured was something the others sitting there couldn't understand. So, he cherished these happy days now. After Yi Xiaotian spoke up, the others didn't dare to argue, but they still whispered complaints. "We were just talking, but Teacher Liang could fight for us too, right? How could she bear it? Forget it. Liang Yu wouldn't dare. She's now Zhang Yi's person. Maybe she got into the shelter by offering her own body. It's very likely. Don't be fooled by Liang Yu's serious demeanor on normal days. I think she's the secretive, promiscuous type, really loose on the inside. Ha ha ha. Let's talk about this more." Just as they gossiped, Liang Yu happened to arrive outside the door with food. Everyone immediately changed their expression. "Teacher Liang, you're finally here. We missed you so much." Liang Yu placed the food on the ground and told them, "Be careful recently. It's not very peaceful around here. Apart from going out to fish, it's best to stay hidden in the cellar. Understand?" Hearing this, Wu Chenyu quickly approached. "Teacher Liang, since it's dangerous, why don't you take us to the shelter? Isn't the shelter the safest place?" The other students caught on and began to plead pitifully for sympathy. Liang Yu ignored them, and after instructing them to be careful, she walked back to the shelter without turning back, ignoring the students' shouts behind her. Wu Chenyu punched the wall. "This damn woman, how can she be so heartless?" He then reluctantly started distributing the food, and everyone began to devour it hungrily, not leaving a single grain of rice. After returning from the snow worship sect, the two major forces began investigating the so-called mysterious force. Radiant Prosperity Base took the lead and soon confirmed that the force was located around Lark Manor and Su Family Town. Because Zhang Yi deliberately placed Gao Yuan's satellite phone in Su Family Town, Radiant Prosperity Base dispatched Dong Hu, known as Flame Fist. Dong Hu was a professional bodyguard before the apocalypse, skilled in various martial arts and shooting, and after awakening his special abilities, he quickly became one of Xiao Holian's most capable subordinates. He was chosen for this mission because of his maturity and prudence, as Zhang Yi's strength was still uncertain, and the main purpose of this mission was reconnaissance. Dong Hu was indeed cautious. He ordered the convoy to stop at the edge of Heron's River and then proceeded on foot. Their modified snow vehicle was very noisy to avoid exposing their target. As soon as he got out of the vehicle, Dong Hu was stunned by the ice fortress not far away. In such harsh conditions, how is this structure built? It's practically an ice great wall. Dong Hu couldn't help but mutter, "This thing can't be taken down without heavy artillery. I think I understand why this force has been able to contend with the powerful West Mountain Base for so long." He immediately warned his subordinates, "Stay sharp. This is a tough opponent. A slight misstep could bury us all here." The soldiers out here for reconnaissance are all cautious by nature and understood this immediately. Dong Hu took out his equipment to track the signal and soon arrived at the entrance to Su Family Town. He immediately called over a particularly sharp subordinate. "You go ahead and scout it out." The soldier moved as lightly as a swallow and quickly infiltrated the village. However, as he walked through, he found it didn't resemble a lively village at all. With 9 out of 10 houses empty, only a few snow houses with closed doors and windows. If there really were armed forces here, there would definitely be guards on duty. The scout breathed a sigh of relief, thinking there were no formidable enemies here. He immediately returned to report to Dong-hu. "Report, Captain. I didn't see a single person in the village, and there are no signs of guard patrols around. It doesn't seem like any forces are present." Dong-hu was surprised. How could this be? He thought about the enemy that West Mountain Base had failed to conquer for so long. Such an enemy couldn't possibly have such weak defenses. Then he thought of the ice fortress across the river and suddenly realized something. Could it be that the real force is actually behind that defensive line? But why is the signal source near here? Could this be a trap? But since they were already here, they needed to collect some useful intelligence. Soon, Dong-hu and his team found where the students were staying. These people were sleeping more soundly than pigs, but the signal source was indeed here. He ordered his men to capture these people for interrogation. Yi Xiaotian, who had sharp instincts, suddenly threw off his blanket and yelled, "Who are you people? Get out of here." One of the soldiers immediately grabbed his neck, lifted him high, and said coldly, "Don't talk nonsense with me, or I'll twist your head off." Yi Xiaotian was stunned. Although he was an enhanced human with physical abilities several times that of ordinary people, the man before him was clearly a seasoned veteran. Yi Xiaotian exerted his strength and forcefully pried open the soldier's hand. Then he kicked him 3 or 4 meters away. Dong-hu, seeing this, was somewhat surprised. Could this be a mutant? Yi Xiaotian knew he was no match for so many people and was about to escape, but Dong-hu teleported to block his path. Yi Xiaotian gathered all his strength in his right hand and threw a punch at Dong-hu's face. But the next second, Dong-hu's fist, ablaze with flames, struck Yi Xiaotian's abdomen at a high speed. Yi Xiaotian was thrown back 2 meters, spitting out a mouthful of blood and kneeling on the ground unconscious. Dong-hu ground his fist and said coldly, "Overestimating yourself." Dong-hu ordered while they were still unconscious, "Tie them all up and take them back. Let the leader decide what to do with them." Meanwhile, inside the shelter, Zhang Yi's phone immediately beeped with a notification. He had previously rigged the satellite phone with Yang Xinxin's help, allowing him to monitor its location in real time. This way, Zhang Yi could not only know that someone had taken it but could also determine the location of their main base. Zhang Yi stood up, looking in the direction of Su Family Town and sighed. As expected, they have come. But what will happen next? After clearing out the West Mountain Base's armory, Zhang Yi felt fully confident in his defensive capabilities, especially now that the defenses were in place. He was not afraid at all, even if the two families joined forces to attack. Thinking this, Zhang Yi started to look forward to it. He then went to the control room to find Yang Xinxin. Yang Xinxin spent most of her time there, as her primary task was to protect the shelter's network security. To prevent external intrusions, she always had to stay alert. The battle at West Mountain Base made them all realize the importance of intelligence. Zhang Yi patted Yang Xinxin on the head and asked with a smile, "How's the research going on the satellite phone data I gave you a few days ago? Did you find any important intelligence?" Yang Xinxin told Zhang Yi, "These people are very cautious, probably regularly clearing the phone's usage records, so we didn't get much. However, from the chat records, we can confirm that the person you killed was named Gao Yuan, a mutant and the cousin of Xiao Honglian, the leader of Radiant Prosperity Base." Hearing this, Zhang Yi couldn't help but facepalm. "That's it then. I've killed the leader's brother. This feud is not going to be resolved easily." Yang Xinxin laughed and said, "It's just a cousin, not a real brother. Their relationship might not even be that close." At this point, Yang Xinxin continued working on the computer and said, "According to the chat records, Radiant Prosperity Base and Morning Dew Base communicate very frequently. Based on this, it's very likely they will join forces. If so, we might face the risk of both bases attacking us together." Zhang Yi remained unusually calm, sighing deeply. "I've thought about this scenario before. The worst outcome is just this. But after the prolonged battle with West Mountain Base, I've lost all fear of these so-called large organizations. They are just a ragtag group that rose to power amid chaos. They don't have major weapons like missiles, so they don't pose a big threat to me." With that, Zhang Yi confidently clenched his fist. "In fact, I hope to fight them. Only by doing so can they fully understand that the territory of West Mountain Base is now mine, Zhang Yi's, and I won't allow them to disturb my peaceful life." Yang Xinxin listened with admiration. "By the way, brother Zhang Yi, their chat records also mention some intelligence about the Snow Worship Sect. According to my analysis, their conflict with Snow Worship Sect is very sharp." Zhang Yi raised an eyebrow. "So what? Are you suggesting we ally with Snow Worship Sect to fight against the two major bases?" Zhang Yi did not have a good impression of Snow Worship Sect. In his eyes, they were nothing more than an organization that exploited people's ignorance and superstition to expand their influence, and they were not to be trusted. Yang Xinxin, however, smiled and said, "I think having an extra friend is always better than having an extra enemy, isn't it?" To this, Zhang Yi shook his head. "No, sometimes an unknown friend can be scarier than a known enemy." Zhang Yi then changed changed the subject. However, if they have any utility value, I wouldn't mind exploiting them a bit. After Dong Hu had secured the students, they rushed back to the Radiant Prosperity base overnight. With these students in hand, he could now report back to his leader. After all, it was just about earning their keep. There was no need to risk further exploration of the ice fortress. After knocking and entering the office, Dong Hu immediately reported today's findings to the leader. We found Gao Yuan's satellite phone and captured a group of students from the prestigious Azure Sky Academy. Their teacher is an associate of Zhang Yi. However, I did not encounter Zhang Yi, but I did discover a huge ice fortress built around Lark Manor. That guy named Zhang Yi must be hiding in there, and they must have used the fortress to fend off West Mountain Base's assault. Xiao Honglian immediately stood up from her chair without a word. Where are those students? I want to interrogate them myself. Meanwhile, Wu Qingyu and the others were taken to a workshop in a refinery where the machinery was still running, making it much warmer than outside. However, the oppressive environment, guarded by heavily armed soldiers, was hardly better than pedaling bicycles at West Mountain Base. Xiao Honglian soon arrived at the workshop. Dong Hu told her, one person has already fainted. He was wearing a combat suit from West Mountain Base. That person must be a modified human from West Mountain Base. Hearing this, Xiao Honglian became interested. I've always been envious of West Mountain Base's human enhancement technology. Keep a close eye on that guy. Once he wakes up, find someone to properly study him. Xiao Honglian sat cross-legged in front of the students, speaking fiercely. You better honestly confess everything you know. Otherwise, the interrogation methods of Radiant Prosperity Base will make you wish you were dead. As soon as she finished speaking, Wu Qingyu quickly cried out in a breaking voice, rest assured, whatever you want to know, we will tell you everything. Just please don't kill us. Seeing this, the other students also chimed in, yes, we won't resist. Whatever information you want about Zhang Yi or our teacher Liang, we'll tell you everything. They were basically scared witless, to the point that Xiao Honglian hadn't even started applying pressure, and they were already spilling everything they knew. Xiao Honglian quickly realized that these ordinary students were all craven wretches, unlikely to possess any core information about Zhang Yi. However, she didn't know much about Zhang Yi herself, so she would take whatever information she could get from them. She lifted the satellite phone and asked, where did this come from? The students all shook their heads, indicating they had never seen it before. Seeing this, Xiao Honglian looked somewhat displeased. Wu Qingyu quickly realized the situation was dire, and he immediately shouted, this thing was left by Zhang Yi. Wu Qingyu had a sudden inspiration, regardless of the question. Blaming everything on Zhang Yi and Liang Yu seemed like the right approach. It was Zhang Yi and Liang Yu who had brought them to Su Family Town, so it made sense for them to take the blame. Xiao Honglian's eyes began to show a hint of murderous intent. Tell me quickly, how many people does that Zhang Yi have? What abilities do they have? How much supplies and weapons do they have? At this, the students' brains went into a crash. Although they knew Zhang Yi was formidable, they had only seen him 2 or 3 times. They knew nothing about these details. They only knew that Yang Xinxin was a top hacker and Liu Karen had some skills in mechanics. In the end, the only somewhat useful information they had was about their teacher Liang Yu, and they spilled all they knew about her. Xiao Honglian shook her head. With just these bits of information, it was hard to assess Zhang Yi's strength. They also understood that limited intelligence was not enough to justify launching an attack rashly. At that moment, Xiao Honglian said calmly and indifferently to the students, is that all? This information is not enough to save your lives. Hearing this, the students were struck as if by lightning, begging hoarsely, please don't kill us. We can still be useful. We can help you find your way. Also, our teacher cares a lot about us. You could use us to blackmail our teacher Liang. She would agree to any conditions. After realizing that the information they provided was of little value, Xiao Honglian stood up somewhat bored, locked them all up and let them think about what else they might be worth. If they can't come up with anything useful, we'll chop them all down as a sacrifice when we march on Zhang Yi. Disappointed and ready to leave, Xiao Honglian was followed by Zhuge Qingting, who caught up saying, boss, I think it wouldn't hurt to try what they suggested. Xiao Honglian disdainfully responded, try what? These wretches are so weak, all looking half dead. They can't even work in the refinery. Keeping them would just be a waste of food. Zhuge Qingting mysteriously suggested, I think Liang Yu might really care about these students. Since Liang Yu is under Zhang Yi, we could use this to our advantage to gauge Zhang Yi's true strength. We might even gain more than expected. Xiao Honglian looked at Zhuge Qingting with a hint of scorn in her smile. Do you really think these ordinary students can threaten Liang Yu or even Zhang Yi? Don't be foolish. In this apocalyptic world, who would compromise for such useless people? Why would anyone sacrifice for you if you can't offer value? Even if Liang Yu is their teacher, she wouldn't be so foolish. Zhuge Qingting smiled enigmatically. Boss, you must understand, not every woman is as rational as you. Maybe Liang Yu is the kind-hearted type. Moreover, according to my analysis, these students look so incapable. They don't seem like they could survive in such harsh conditions for long. If they are living near Zhang Yi's shelter, it means someone has been taking care of them, and that person is clearly Liang Yu. After listening to Zhuge Qingting's analysis, Xiao Honglian also found it quite reasonable. She pondered and muttered softly, could it be that this Liang Yu is a Mary Sue? Su? Zhuge Qingting laughed. Definitely. This gives us an opportunity. At this, Xiao Honglian immediately ordered, find a way for the information department to contact Zhang Yi and put collars on those students and lock them in the underground cells. Meanwhile, in the shelter, Liang Yu, having just finished dinner, stood up and said to Zhang Yi, I should go deliver food to the students. At that moment, Zhang Yi looked at Liang Yu with concern. Go and come back soon. It's so cold outside. Don't freeze yourself. Liang Yu, a bit embarrassed, took the food from him. Watching her leave, Zhang Yi couldn't help but think, I wonder what she will do when she finds out all her students are gone. Given her stubborn nature, she surely won't just stand by. Could there be any extreme actions? Zhang Yi didn't dare to think further. This was also a test for Liang Yu. If she really caused any trouble, then I would have no choice but to ask her to leave the shelter. Liang Yu, carrying the food, arrived at Su family town and went to the snow hut where the students usually gathered, only to find, upon opening the door, that it was completely empty. Liang Yu's heart skipped a beat, immediately feeling a sense of foreboding. She knew these inherently lazy students well. Other than going out to fish, they would usually curl up in this relatively warm hut. Where could they have gone? With the students gone, Su family town was eerily silent. Liang Yu searched house to house, naturally to no avail. She forced herself to consider all sorts of unpleasant possibilities. What was the purpose of kidnapping the students? Why only capture her students and not the surrounding villagers? Could there be some unknown secret? The more Liang Yu thought, the more her head ached, and the more she couldn't understand, the more her worry grew. She might be disappointed in these students, but having protected them for so long since the apocalypse, they had become a kind of obsession for her. She couldn't just watch her students, whom she had taught for years, go to their deaths. Struggling, Liang Yu muttered to herself, it looks like I'll have to ask Zhang Yi for help. The students' sudden disappearance was clearly no accident, but a planned action. If someone really targeted them, then the target must be me. Liang Yu sprinted back to the shelter, telling herself, I can't let them die because of me. Breathless, she returned to the shelter, where Zhang Yi looked on with feigned calmness. What's happened to make you rush like this? Out of breath, Liang Yu said, something terrible has happened. All my students have disappeared. Everyone present showed surprise. Could they have gone out to fish, or to find some wood for heating? While they verbally expressed concern, their eyes betrayed their indifference. Liang Yu shook her head. I've searched everywhere I could think of. Not a single one of the dozen or so is to be found. Liang Yu looked anxiously at Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi, could it be that those forces Xin found out about have infiltrated here? Zhang Yi pretended to ponder. It's possible, but if it really was those forces, why would they take your students? Could it be that some old enemy from your days as a bodyguard has come after you? Liang Yu immediately denied it. I don't have any enemies. I've been teaching for many years, always diligently and quietly, without making any enemies. Zhang Yi quickly reassured her. There's no rush. Getting anxious won't help. The priority now is to calm down and think of a strategy. We can start by checking if anyone has approached the shelter recently to see if there are any clues. As he spoke, Zhang Yi turned on the surveillance footage, quickly scanning the area's activities over the past 24 hours at high speed. The surveillance confirmed that Zhang Yi had not left the shelter, indirectly proving his non-involvement and dispelling any possible suspicions from Liang Yu. Zhang Yi, thinking aloud, said, this is troublesome. We don't know which force is behind this, nor their intentions. Although we know of 4 major organizations in Heavenly Sea City, we can't rule out the existence of other unknown, smaller forces. This puts us in a passive position, and it seems there's nothing we can do right now. They must be plotting something, and they might contact us soon. Hearing this, Liang Yu clenched her fists. I haven't offended anyone. Why would they target me? At that moment, Zhang Yi said with a smile, the answer isn't complicated. Since they've taken your students, they clearly want to blackmail you for something, so they should be safe for now, and you shouldn't worry too much. Liang Yu shuddered, wishing she could do something for her students, but she realized helplessly that she was powerless to act. Oscar owes Zhang Yi an award. He grasped Liang Yu's hand warmly and said, don't worry, Liang Yu, your concerns are mine too. I promised I would take care of those students for you, and I will see it through. I, Zhang Yi, am not one to break my word. Liang Yu's heart trembled, touched by his sudden warmth, and she bashfully replied, okay, I'll listen to you. At that moment, Zhang Yi verbally assured her that he would act immediately upon receiving any news about them, but internally he thought, finally, I've gotten rid of these burdens. It won't be long before those useless ones are dead. Even if the people from Radiant Prosperity Base don't act, the drugs I've administered should soon take effect. Zhang Yi gave a knowing look to Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen, who understood and continued to brainwash Liang Yu as they escorted her back to her room. Meanwhile, Zhou Kier, looking worried, came over and asked, Zhang Yi, could it be that one of those forces has made a move? Zhang Yi didn't hide it and confirmed directly, probably so. Seeing this, Yang Mi squeezed over and said, we haven't had a few peaceful days yet. How come we're starting to fight again? Zhang Yi couldn't help but think about how he had killed Gao Yuan and hadn't told anyone else. Zhang Yi laughed dismissively. You're mistaken. In the apocalypse, war and conflict are the norm. It's not that war disrupts our lives, but rather, we use war to gain brief moments of peace. Zhang Yi wrapped his arms around the two of them, pondering, as long as it's not a united front of the 4 major forces, our defenses should hold up fine. But if they really do unite, that could be problematic. At that that moment, Zhou Ke, with a hint of jealousy, turned back and asked, "What if those students have already died?" Teacher Liang would be devastated. "Don't you feel sorry for Liang Yu?" Zhang Yi appeared indifferent. "Feel sorry? She's a martial artist. She's not that fragile." Zhou Ke blinked. "Don't you have any other feelings for Liang Yu? Like, feelings of affection?" Zhang Yi laughed. "I do admire her, but only as a friend. But if she can't pass my test, then I might as well not have such a friend. As for romance, it's just a seasoning, not a necessity." Zhang Yi then summoned Uncle Yu and Chun Lei to discuss the entire situation. Uncle Yu was relatively calm. "Ever since we killed those from Morning Dew Base at the gates of West Mountain, I knew this conflict was inevitable." Chun Lei scratched his head, exasperated. "Can't these guys ever give it a rest? It's hard enough surviving in the apocalypse without all this fighting." Zhang Yi calmly explained, "You're both thinking too simply. There will always be ambitious people who want more power. Once their basic survival is secured, their desires will inevitably expand. From the standpoint of personal safety, only by eliminating all surrounding threats can one truly rest easy. And let's not just talk about them. Even someone as desireless as myself, if I knew of any force threatening me nearby, I would also make sure to eliminate them." Zhang Yi encouraged Chun Lei. "Don't worry, everything is under control." Zhang Yi, clenching his fist confidently, said, "It seems we need to show them a bit of our strength. Only by making them realize we are not to be trifled with. Merely killing a few of their soldiers, they will naturally hesitate to trouble us again. This matter could be big or small." Uncle Yu laughed and folded his arms. "Just do it. We've survived this long by fighting our way through. If they dare to disturb us, we'll face them to the end." Chun Lei sighed resignedly. "We'll follow the boss's plan." Just then, a faint sound of an engine came from outside the shelter. The three immediately stood up, alert. "Someone's coming." Zhang Yi instinctively ran to the second-floor balcony and looked through the one-way glass, indeed spotting a modified snow vehicle similar to those he had seen at Radiant Prosperity Base. The snow vehicle was moving fast, seemingly not planning to stop, but when it came close enough, it suddenly opened its window and shot a steel crossbow bolt towards the shelter. The bolt struck the exterior wall of the shelter, and after doing this, the snow vehicle attempted to speed away. Seeing the hostile approach, Zhang Yi immediately pulled out a large gun, a cold smile curling at his lips. Thinking of running? Not a chance. Zhang Yi aimed at the snow vehicle's tires, and with a loud bang, the tire exploded, causing the vehicle to overturn instantly. Seeing this, Zhang Yi opened the window and jumped from the second floor without hesitation, now adept at using his spatial abilities. As he fell, he activated his spatial powers, allowing him to land as lightly as a feather. Uncle Yu and Flower followed him. After the snow vehicle had overturned, one soldier was trapped under it, while another tried to pull him out. Just then, Zhang Yi and Uncle Yu, riding on Flower, reached them in a few leaps. Seeing Zhang Yi's aggressive approach, the rescuing soldier decisively abandoned his companion and ran. Zhang Yi raised his gun and fired, the bullet piercing the soldier's calf. With a scream, he collapsed into the snow. The other soldier tried to draw his pistol to retaliate, but was quickly subdued by Uncle Yu, who grabbed his neck. Zhang Yi surveyed the two soldiers and realized they were not mutants, which suggested they weren't on a combat mission, but likely scouting. Just as he was planning to capture them for interrogation, both soldiers clenched their teeth, their complexions paled instantly, and they died within seconds. Uncle Yu, examining the soldiers' mouths, said they had poison in their teeth. They must have been scouts, and some organizations indeed do this to prevent captured scouts from revealing information. Zhang Yi looked frustrated. Letting them die so easily really lets them off the hook. I had planned to sweet-talk them into giving us some useful intelligence before finishing them off. Now, we don't even know what their purpose was. Just then, Chun Lei ran up, panting, holding the arrow that had been shot. A red cloth was tied to the shaft of the arrow. "Boss, I pulled out the arrow they shot over. Come and see." Zhang Yi immediately tensed up and said, "Stop. Don't come any closer." Chun Lei then realized something. Having been too eager to show the arrow to Zhang Yi for praise, he had forgotten that it might have been tampered with. It could have been coated with poison or even rigged with a small explosive, which would have been disastrous for him. Zhang Yi cautiously reminded Chun Lei, "Slowly, put down the crossbow bolt you're holding." Chun Lei shakily placed the arrow on the snow. As soon as Chun Lei let go of the arrow, Zhang Yi activated his spatial abilities in that instant, sucking the bolt into his alternate space. Fortunately, his space was relatively time-stopped, so even if it exploded directly, it wouldn't have much impact. Zhang Yi shifted his view into the alternate space, but found no bomb, only a red letter attached to the end. Zhang Yi, still cautious, glanced at Chun Lei's gloves. "Quickly take them off and throw them away. It's good you were wearing gloves, otherwise if the arrow had been poisoned, you'd really be a dead man now." Chun Lei understood Zhang Yi's concern and, disregarding the cold, hurriedly took off his gloves with a look of disgust. Back at the shelter, Zhang Yi wrapped the arrow and handed it to Zhou Ke for examination. "Here, see if you can check for poison on this." Looking at the letter inside the bag, Zhou Ke couldn't help but ask, "If they were just delivering a letter, I think they might not mean any harm, right? They wouldn't need to read resort to such low tactics? Zhang Yi, ever cautious, responded, better safe than sorry, especially in this apocalyptic world. Enemies often strike when you least expect it. Uncle Yu also agreed, being cautious is never a mistake. The moment you let your guard down is often when the enemy has the easiest time striking. Any complacency can lead to fatal consequences. Hearing this, Zhou Qi seriously donned her gloves and expertly applied a testing reagent to the arrowhead, which immediately changed color. The originally blue reagent turned green. Everyone present was shocked by the process, especially Chun Lei, who turned pale, thinking about how close he had come to losing his life, his legs going weak. Yet Zhang Yi remained exceptionally calm. Never be complacent with enemies. They will use every possible means to take our lives. I thought of this because if I were in their position, I might use such tactics too. After all, when facing an enemy, every kill counts. Zhou Qi covered the poison arrow with a glass dome. Should we call Xinxin to study this unknown message on the red paper? Zhang Yi called over Yang Xinxin and Liang Yu, deciding there was no need to hide anything from Liang Yu anymore. After all, those students were undoubtedly doomed. Yang Xinxin quickly understood after a glance. This is an address. Through this address, we can contact Radiant Prosperity Base. Zhang Yi calmly asked, is that safe? Yang Xinxin confidently responded, with me here, brother, you have nothing to worry about. At this moment, Liang Yu, looking worried, said, given the current situation, can we assume that the people who took my students are from Radiant Prosperity Base? Zhang Yi replied, it's very likely. The two incidents happening so close together can't be a coincidence. Liang Yu, somewhat anxious, said, then let's contact them quickly to see what their intentions are. Zhang Yi didn't answer immediately, but crossed his arms and pondered. There could be two reasons they sent their contact information. First, for negotiations, using Gao Yuan's death and the students' safety as bargaining chips. Second, to test us, as they are unsure of our strength and want to gauge what we might do. With this in mind, Zhang Yi concluded, since they want to test us, we can test them too. After all, we know very little about their information. Zhang Yi looked up and said, we can talk to them. Liang Yu's face lit up, thinking there was hope for rescuing the students. However, Zhang Yi then said seriously, but there's something I must make clear to you. I understand your urgency to save people, but you must not show that during the negotiations. If you appear too concerned about the students, we'll easily be put at a disadvantage. Understand? Liang Yu thought for a moment, then nodded firmly. Understood. It was time for Zhang Yi to act. After deciding to contact Radiant Prosperity Base, Zhang Yi immediately instructed Yang Xinxin to establish contact. Yang Xinxin opened her laptop, entered the network address, sent out a call request, and then positioned the laptop in front of Zhang Yi. Soon a deep voice came from the computer. Who is this? Zhang Yi, with a serious expression, responded, I am Zhang Yi. There was a moment of silence on the other end, followed shortly by a cool female voice. You are Zhang Yi, the little boss from around Lark Manor? Zhang Yi laughed and said, and who might you be? Xiao Honglian snorted coldly. I am Xiao Honglian, the boss of Radiant Prosperity Base. The people I sent to the expansive material factory were killed by you, weren't they? Zhang Yi didn't plan to deny it, because regardless of whether he admitted it or not, the battle was inevitable. He simply countered, the people who took away a dozen from Su family town yesterday, that was your doing, right? Neither directly answered the other's question, nor outright denied anything. Hearing this, Xiao Honglian's eyes flashed with murderous intent. Who gave you the courage to kill my people? In the whole Heavenly Sea City, who the hell dares to touch someone from my Radiant Prosperity Base? Zhang Yi, it seems you've grown tired of living. Zhang Yi scoffed dismissively. That sounds familiar. The last person who spoke to me like that is grass growing 2 meters high on his grave. You should know him. His name was Chen Xinyan. Xiao Honglian's pupils dilated, realizing the downfall of West Mountain Base was indeed related to this Zhang Yi. How strong could he be, given that West Mountain Base possessed the strongest armament in Heavenly Sea City, and Zhang Yi had destroyed it? It meant he was also capable of destroying Radiant Prosperity Base. However, Xiao Honglian wasn't completely fooled. Do you think I'm an idiot? West Mountain Base was destroyed by a missile. What does that have to do with you? Don't try to take credit for everything. You don't have that kind of power. Hearing this, Zhang Yi laughed. Have you ever considered why the missile specifically targeted West Mountain Base? Xiao Honglian was momentarily stunned. The missile that night had indeed shocked many, and they didn't have connections with people from River South Domain, so the origins of the missile were unclear. Zhang Yi's comment made her somewhat believe that the missile could indeed have been orchestrated by Zhang Yi. Xiao Honglian, still keeping her composure, said, look at yourself. Do you really think you have the power to do that? Upon hearing this, Zhang Yi's tone became more forceful. I don't want to waste words with you. Believe it or not, I just hope you'll know better in the future and stop bothering us. I can kill a batch of your people, and I can kill a second batch. If you're brave enough, come at us, and I'll make sure you won't return. Seeing the atmosphere turn so tense, Liang Yu looked on anxiously. Noticing her concern, Zhang Yi softened his tone a bit. The students you took from me, I'd like them returned safely. Otherwise, I won't let this go. Hearing this, Xiao Honglian was instantly provoked, abruptly standing up and shouting angrily, what a big talker. Do you think Radiant Prosperity Base gets scared easily? If you really had the power to call in missiles, the whole Heavenly Sea City would be under your control by by now. Do you believe I could chop those students up right now and send their bodies back to you? Liang Yu's heart nearly leapt out of her chest as she frantically signaled Zhang Yi with her eyes. Zhang Yi thought, I wish you would just make your move. But seeing the worried Liang Yu next to him, he responded with feigned composure. Calm down. Those guys mean nothing to me. Even if you kill them, it won't affect me. Xiao Honglian sneered after hearing this. Stop pretending. It sounds like they are very important to you. Seems like I hold some valuable cards here. Zhang Yi resumed his acting, showing himself to be caught in a difficult position, which made Liang Yu feel incredibly guilty. In her eyes, Zhang Yi was being manipulated by the opposition just to help save her students. To help her, he could have ignored the students' fate, but now he was being humiliated for her sake. Zhang Yi sighed deeply. If you're sincere about negotiating, then make an offer. What will it take to let those students go? At this, Xiao Honglian's smile almost split her face. She was sure she had found Zhang Yi's weak spot. Unexpectedly, Xiao Honglian demanded a hefty price. You killed my cousin and his soldiers, and now you want me to release your people. In that case, you'll need to trade with supplies. We've also figured out you're heavily involved in the theft at the Southern Walmart warehouse. I don't ask for much. Just split those supplies with me. Give me half, and I'll return your people intact. I can even pretend the murder of my cousin never happened. From then on, we'll keep to our own. How about that? Xiao Honglian's tone was playful. If Zhang Yi agreed, it would mean he was scared. It would also confirm her suspicion that the battle with West Mountain Base had drained his resources, which is why he lacked the courage to confront Radiant Prosperity Base. Without hesitation, Zhang Yi flatly refused. Keep dreaming. Xiao Honglian scoffed dismissively. In that case, I'll see you on the battlefield. I'm not joking around here. Zhang Yi was not to be outdone. I wiped out West Mountain Base. Do you really think you're stronger than them? Xiao Honglian laughed. You were also greatly weakened in the battle with West Mountain Base, weren't you? And as far as I know, you've killed people from Morning Dew Base too. We can form an alliance and attack you at any time. Do you really think you have the strength to contend with a combined force from our two bases? Don't overestimate yourself. I'm only asking for half your supplies, which is quite generous of me. If it comes to a fight, you'll regret it too late. Zhang Yi's tone was very calm. Truly, ignorance is bliss. I must remind you, you know nothing about our strength. If you're really not afraid of dying, then come on over. I'm actually looking forward to seeing you run away in defeat. Then Zhang Yi changed tack. However, I want to make it clear that those students are innocent. I hope you will send them back. The more Zhang Yi said this, the more Xiao Honglian felt she had grasped Zhang Yi's vulnerability. Otherwise, why would he keep bringing them up? Xiao Honglian sneered. Just return them because you said so. Where would that leave my face? Unless you accept my terms, there is no deal. Zhang Yi frowned. Xiao Honglian, don't push it too far. Come at me if you have issues. Why harm those innocent students? They are students of a woman I highly value. If you dare harm them, I will make you pay a heavy price. But internally he thought, just hurry up and kill them. I'm tired of this act. Xiao Honglian laughed aloud. It seems they are quite important to you. Well, I refuse to release them. I'll torture them severely. Let them beg for life, but wish for death. And all this because of you, Zhang Yi. Ha ha ha. Then she hung up the phone. From her tone, it seemed likely she was off to torment the students to vent her anger. Zhang Yi angrily slammed the table. This woman is intolerable. She should come at me if she has the guts. Why bully those defenseless students? No longer willing to be passive, Zhang Yi adopted a posture ready to storm Radiant Prosperity Base to rescue them. I'm going to Radiant Prosperity Base to save them now. He looked at Chun Lei and Uncle Yu. This mission to Radiant Prosperity Base isn't like the last attack on West Mountain Base. We don't have the advantage of timing, terrain, or support, so you guys stay out of this. This isn't your fight, and I don't want you involved. Zhang Yi was determined to dash to Radiant Prosperity Base. Shou Kir and Yang Mi immediately came over to restrain him. Brother Zhang Yi, please don't act rashly. Not only could this fail to save the students, but you might also end up losing your own life. Chun Lei, standing to the side with a speechless expression, spoke in a volume only the two of them could hear. Boss, that's enough acting. Any more would be overdoing it. Zhang Yi pretended to struggle free from the two holding him inside. They've gone too far, completely disregarding me. They dare to kidnap people on my turf. I must show them a lesson. He then punched the sofa fiercely. I promised Liang Yu I would take good care of these students. Liang Yu, moved by Zhang Yi's seemingly selfless stance, walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. Zhang Yi, calm down. This is ultimately my responsibility. It's my fault for not protecting them better. You've done your best, but this really isn't your concern. I don't want to drag everyone else into this. After saying this, she turned to leave. Liang Yu squeezed out a smile, but her expression made Zhang Yi feel something was off. Liang Yu, don't do anything foolish. Liang Yu stopped in her tracks and spoke calmly. Don't worry, I just want some quiet time. She then walked towards her room. At that moment, Shou Kir muttered worriedly, I hope Liang Yu isn't thinking of going to rescue them by herself. Zhang Yi rubbed his chin, puzzled. I just put in so much effort, and it didn't even move her. Chun Lei cheekily came closer. Boss, your acting is indeed good, but it was a bit over the top, suddenly becoming so righteous and upright. Anyone with eyes could see through that. Zhang Yi looked around. Everyone silently nodded. Then he awkwardly spread his hands. Even so, I at least made a stand in front of her. Uncle Yu added from behind. This matter really really isn't much of your concern. After all, you're not obligated to protect those students. That's Liang Yu's responsibility. It's probably for the best this way. Those students were nothing but lazy and useless, just a burden. Even Uncle Yu, known for his kindness, could say such things, which shows how disappointing those students were. Zhang Yi seriously told everyone, just so everyone's prepared, be ready for a possible attack. Fortunately, our defenses are well prepared, so there's no need to be overly anxious. Also, from Xiao Holian's arrogant behavior, it's clear they don't have a clear understanding of our strength. With Zhang Yi's words, everyone felt a bit more reassured, especially since they had recently defeated West Mountain Base and established strong defenses. Meanwhile, Lu Karen looked in the direction Liang Yu had gone. I'm still a bit worried about Teacher Liang. Zhang Yi told Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen, you two go and talk to her. Lu Karen sighed, I'm afraid it might not work. Don't be fooled by Teacher Liang's gentle demeanor. She can be incredibly stubborn. Zhang Yi laughed. They are her students that she wants to protect. Aren't you also her students? Try your best. At that time, Liang Yu was in her room, cleaning her long sword. Since her treasured dragon's roar was taken by Zhang Yi, he had shown no signs of returning it. Liang Yu had resigned herself to this fact and hadn't had the audacity to ask for it back. Fortunately, she later acquired a fine long sword at West Mountain Base. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, which she hadn't closed. Turning around to see Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen, she immediately put down her long sword. Yang Xinxin asked with concern, Teacher Liang, are you alright? Seeing the long sword in Liang Yu's hands, Yang Xinxin immediately realized something. Teacher Liang, you can't do something foolish. You aren't thinking of going to rescue them by yourself, are you? Lu Karen also looked surprised. The opposition is a huge base organization. You can't possibly save anyone by yourself. You'd just be walking into certain death. Liang Yu knew this all too well. I understand all that, but I have to rely on myself for this. I owe Zhang Yi too much, and I can't drag him into this. But I also know that he is always cautious and wouldn't risk his life for me. But I can't just watch them die. Seeing that Liang Yu was unconvinced, Yang Xinxin suddenly had a flash of inspiration and looked pitifully at Liang Yu. If Teacher Liang is determined to leave, then please take us with you. Brother Zhang Yi has given Lu Karen and me a task, because in his heart, Teacher Liang is a very important woman. If we fail to complete this task, even if Brother Zhang Yi doesn't punish us, we won't have the face to stay here anymore. So if you want to leave, take us with you. Liang Yu felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, she was pleased to know that Zhang Yi had special feelings for her, and on the other, Yang Xinxin's words made her worry. Seeing this, Yang Xinxin continued, so please stay for now. We still have room to negotiate with Radiant Prosperity Base. Let's wait a bit longer. After Yang Xinxin's earnest persuasion, Liang Yu finally gave up her plan to confront Radiant Prosperity Base. Once they were outside, Lu Karen curiously asked, Xinxin, does Big Brother really have feelings for Teacher Liang? Yang Xinxin's lips curved into a mischievous smile. No, I made it up. The hardest thing for an old maid like Teacher Liang to deal with is emotions. As long as she knows someone likes her, her heart gets all flustered. That gives me a chance to persuade her. Lu Karen's eyes widened. You're quite the schemer. Yang Xinxin shrugged it off. I'm doing this for her own good. Otherwise, she really might have gone to her death. Then Yang Xinxin's tone changed. Keeping Teacher Liang in the shelter is definitely good for us. After all, the shelter doesn't keep freeloaders. With such a strong teacher here, we can stay here with peace of mind. This remark made Lu Karen shiver as she remembered that it was because of Yang Xinxin's pleading that she had the chance to come here initially. Knowing that Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen had managed to calm Liang Yu, Zhang Yi felt much relieved. She was like a sharp sword in his hand. After all, Liang Yu would be very useful in the future, and he could not afford to lose such a valuable ally. Zhang Yi looked out the window, deep in thought. They should be feeling the effects of the poison by now. These detestable students are finally about to be done with. Right after the call ended, Xiao Holian was somewhat surprised by Zhang Yi's assertive demeanor. However, it seemed that whenever Liang Yu's students were mentioned, his tone would significantly soften. This indicated two things. First, despite being severely weakened from the battle with West Mountain, Zhang Yi still possessed considerable strength and confidence. Second, those students were very important to Zhang Yi. This meant that Xiao Holian had grasped a lever over Zhang Yi and could use this opportunity to exploit him thoroughly. Xiao Holian couldn't help but fantasize about taking over the territory of West Mountain Base and even bringing Zhang Yi and his mutants under her control. The more she thought about it, the more excited she became. Zhuge Qingting also congratulated her. Given the current situation, their surrender seems inevitable. I think we must act quickly to take down Zhang Yi's forces once and for all. Otherwise, if Emerald Waterside, Morning Dew, or even Snow Worship Sect get there first, we'll miss out big time. Xiao Holian cautiously waved her hand. Let's not rush into action. We need to be absolutely sure before making a move. Remember, the other three powers have been eyeing our refinery. If we rashly move our forces to attack Zhang Yi, they might attack our headquarters at any moment. We could be robbed blind without even knowing. Zhuge Qingting argued, but opportunities don't wait for anyone. If we miss this chance, we'll have to share this juicy piece with others. Xiao Holian glared at him. I'd rather keep our troops here to protect our refinery, as that is is fundamental to our survival. So many are coveting this refinery now, and if we make a misstep, we could all end up dead. Zhuge Qingting quickly responded with respect. I will follow your orders, leader. Xiao Honglian, looking confident, said, since those students are so important to Zhang Yi, let's provoke him a bit. Go to the dungeon and give those students a harsh lesson and record the process to send to Zhang Yi. Also, gather all the information you can on Zhang Yi. We need to thoroughly understand their defensive capabilities before we act, and we must not underestimate them. We can't afford to lose. Zhuge Qingting quickly made his way to the dungeon, prepared to personally handle the situation and treat the students. He whipped out a long whip and swung it indiscriminately through the crowd, eliciting cries of pain from the bound students. Zhuge Qingting knew how to measure his strikes. He knew how to inflict maximum pain without causing death. He recorded various dramatic scenes, but while filming, suddenly a student collapsed on the ground, spitting out a large amount of green foam. Upon closer inspection, several students began showing symptoms of vomiting. Zhuge Qingting immediately realized this was a sign of poisoning. How could they be poisoned? Panic. Zhuge Qingting knew it would be problematic if these students died under his watch, as it would be difficult to explain to Xiao Honglian. He quickly grabbed his communicator to report to her. Xiao Honglian immediately sat upright upon hearing the news. These students were important pawns and couldn't just die like this. Quickly, get them medical help. The base's doctor informed him that the students were deeply poisoned. 2 had already died, and the others were barely hanging on. Under past medical conditions, there might have been hope for them, but now there was almost nothing that could be done. Zhuge Qingting felt immense turmoil inside. The pawns he had gone through so much trouble to capture were all dying. Suddenly, it dawned on him, and he loudly told Xiao Honglian, this is bad. We've fallen into Zhang Yi's trap. Xiao Honglian looked confused. What do you mean? Zhuge Qingting quickly explained. These people had been poisoned with a slow-acting toxin. Even Gao Yuan's satellite phone was deliberately placed there. It was all a lure. These are all Zhang Yi's machinations. Xiao Honglian then realized that they had been manipulated using these dying people, that they had been used as tools in someone else's plan, busy doing someone else's bidding as part of a plan designed from the start. Realizing they might have been played, but still intent on using whatever was left, Xiao Honglian immediately instructed Zhuge Qingting, quickly, while those guys are still alive, record a video and send it to Zhang Yi. If those people aren't poisoned by Zhang Yi, we might still be able to exploit the situation. Shortly after, Zhang Yi entered the control room. As expected, Radiant Prosperity Base soon made contact with them. Zhang Yi closed the door to the control room, ensuring only they were involved in this call. It was a video call. Zhuge Qingting spoke with a touch of cold indifference. Another day has passed. How have you considered? He then turned somber. Today I'm contacting you to deliver a special gift. I think you'll appreciate it. As soon as he finished speaking, the screen began to display the video of the torture session. Zhang Yi watched quietly, his face and heart showing no emotion. After watching the video, he calmly asked, are these guys still alive? Zhuge Qingting was taken aback by the indifference, a stark contrast to yesterday's tension. Today's tone and expression conveyed detachment and disregard. Zhuge Qingting said in a grave voice, they are still alive for now, but I don't know how much longer they can last. Our patience has its limits. Also, our leader mentioned yesterday about wanting half of your supplies, but we've changed our minds. Keeping these people is just a waste of our food, so we might as well return them to you. 1 person for 1 ton of food. That doesn't sound too excessive, does it? Hearing this, Zhang Yi laughed, then added with a playful tone, that can be arranged, but I need to see those students with my own eyes first. I can't trade tens of tons of food only to receive a pile of corpses in return. He had already calculated the dosage of the poison well. According to Show Care, those people wouldn't last more than a week. Zhuge Qingting responded, didn't you just watch the video? Do you want me to beat them up again? At this, Zhang Yi sternly said, don't waste my time. Don't think I don't know that was a recording. I want to see a live video. Once I confirm their safety, I'll immediately arrange for the supplies. Zhuge Qingting looked grimly at the screen. All we want are the supplies. We have no interest in those people's lives. We have no reason to kill them. Zhang Yi spread his hands. Then why not let me have a look? Zhuge Qingting hastily said, Zhang Yi, I feel like you're not sincere in these negotiations. Before he could say more, Zhang Yi cut off the call. He turned to Yang Xinxin and said, those guys are already dead. Zhang Yi could tell from Zhuge Qingting's guilty expression. Curious, Yang Xinxin asked, brother, how did you do it? Since the control room was just the 2 of them, Zhang Yi openly shared with Yang Xinxin, I added some technology and a harsh substance to their food. Relieved, Yang Xinxin praised him, brother, you're really incredible. We finally don't have to be dragged down by those people anymore. Zhang Yi patted her head and said, you and Lu Karen take good care of Liang Yu these next few days. I'm worried she might not take it well. Yang Xinxin jokingly suggested, I think you should handle it, brother. You'd probably do a much better job than Lu Karen and I. Zhang Yi raised an eyebrow playfully. You mean to say I should enlighten her? Forget it. That blockhead won't appreciate it. Also, make sure not to tell a third person about this conversation. At this time in Radiant Prosperity Base, the toxins in the students' bodies had finally taken full effect, ending risking their lives in excruciating pain. Zhuge Qingting, feeling helpless, reported this to Xiao Honglian. Without their bargaining chips, they no longer had any leverage in negotiations with Zhang Yi. Xiao Honglian, frustrated, slowly raised her head and said with a murderous look, "Then we have no choice but to fight him." Radiant Prosperity Base declared war. The day after ending the previous call, Zhang Yi received another message, this time, a video. He and Yang Xinxin were the first to see it. In the video, on a metal rack, hung several cold heads. Xiao Honglian stood in front of the rack, looking into the camera with a dismissive gaze, and said coldly, "Here's an appetizer for you. Soon, your and your friends' heads will hang on this execution rack." Zhang Yi, sipping his coffee, was utterly unmoved. The brief 1-minute video was simply a declaration of war. Relieved, Zhang Yi exhaled deeply. Finally, they are all dead. But Yang Xinxin, somewhat regretful, commented, "In the end, they couldn't escape this fate." Zhang Yi was surprised. "Shouldn't you be happy? Why are you getting sentimental?" Yang Xinxin shook her head. "It's hard to say whether I'm happy or sad. I really wanted them gone, but seeing them die like that still brings a sense of sorrow." Lowering her head and clenching her fists, Yang Xinxin's voice trembled slightly. "I'm worried that one day, my own head might end up like theirs." Zhang Yi was taken aback by her words, but quickly understood. Despite her intelligence and cunning, Yang Xinxin was still an 18-year-old girl. Witnessing the gruesome deaths of her peers, it was natural for her to feel frightened. With this in mind, Zhang Yi moved closer and hugged Yang Xinxin's shoulders, comforting her warmly. "With your brother here, I'll make sure you're never hurt, because I won't die, so you must also live well." Yang Xinxin, vital for his logistical support, would be well protected by Zhang Yi. Moved to tears, Yang Xinxin said, "It's great to have a brother like you. I promise to be useful and not disappoint you. Please, never abandon me, okay? If I ever become a burden to you, I'll handle it myself." Zhang Yi didn't respond verbally, just nodded slightly. He then copied the video onto a USB drive. He decided to make this video public, especially for Liang Yu to see, to utterly discourage her and help her let go of any lingering hopes. However, Yang Xinxin also warned this scene might be too much for Teacher Liang. Zhang Yi had already considered this. He handed Yang Xinxin a packet of powder, saying, "Slip this into her coffee. Don't worry, it's just a sedative." Soon, Zhang Yi gathered everyone in the living room. Before showing the video, he made sure to caution everyone, "This video is quite gruesome, so please try not to get too agitated." Hearing this, Liang Yu immediately felt something was off. The video came from Radiant Prosperity Base, which must be related to her students. Zhang Yi projected the video onto the large screen. At the first glance, Liang Yu's eyes widened in disbelief. Her head seemed to explode, and the whole world appeared to spin around her. Dozens of familiar heads hung from a metal rack. Liang Yu felt as if struck by lightning, realizing they were all dead. After witnessing the tragic death of her students, Liang Yu felt the world spinning and then blacked out, collapsing onto the sofa. Shou Kir and Yang Mi quickly came over with concern. "Teacher Liang, are you alright?" Lu Karen also looked on, visibly anxious. Zhang Yi, standing aside, spoke calmly. "She's fine, just overwhelmed by the shock. Her brain temporarily shut down. I had already given her some sedatives in advance. She just needs some rest now." Uncle Yu couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. Teacher Liang truly is a dedicated and responsible teacher. This is indeed a great blow to her. I hope she can get through this soon. At that moment, Zhang Yi helped Liang Yu up and remarked, "Time eventually heals all wounds." Zhang Yi then carried Liang Yu to his bed, turned to Lu Karen and Yang Xinxin, and instructed, "You two take good care of her these next few days. Make sure to stabilize her emotions." He then told Zhou Kir, "Prepare some sedatives. If her emotions remain unstable, increase the dosage. It's better for her to stay in bed than to act recklessly." Zhou Kir nodded obediently. After settling Liang Yu, everyone returned to the living room where Zhang Yi began discussing their defensive strategy. The conflict with Radiant Prosperity Base seems inevitable now, and Morning Dew Base might also join the fray, increasing our defensive pressure significantly. We'll hold the first line of defense, and if that fails, we'll retreat to the shelter. However, they won't deploy their full forces in the first wave. As long as we make them pay a price, they should withdraw. After all, our conflict with the two bases hasn't escalated to a life and death struggle yet. This battle is more about showing strength. If we appear strong, they will back off. If we appear weak, they will likely try to eliminate us. So, my task is to demonstrate our strength to deter them from encroaching on West Mountain's territory. Just then, not far from the shelter, a figure in a red cloak appeared. He was Grand Cleric Xiao Jianwu of Snow Worship Sect. His steps were not fast, but they were exceedingly steady. Braving the wind and snow, he reached a hillside and gazed from afar at the shelter. Soon, his eyes emitted a golden light, and the shelter seemed transparent under his gaze. The Grand Cleric was taken aback. What kind of power is this? The vision of the shelter filled with fantastical elements, enveloped in a vast aura. He widened his eyes in awe. In this world, aside from that one, there exists such a formidable mutant. Could he also be a right-hand man of the gods? His ability was energy observation, which allowed him to see the aura around each person. The more vibrant the life force, the more vigorous the aura, especially in powerful mutants, whose aura appeared even richer. The more magnificent and vast the aura, the more powerful the mutant was. Moreover, Moreover, he could distinguish gifted mutants and those yet unawakened. His unique ability enabled him to preach on behalf of Yuan Konya, rapidly expanding and strengthening Snow Worship sect. Taking a deep breath, Grand Cleric Zhao Jianhua turned and walked back, thinking, such a powerful aura from Zhang Yi. This is a significant discovery.